There is a smell that every estate has. It doesn't matter if the house is a three-bedroom ranch in suburban Ohio or a four-story Victorian on a cobblestone street in Savannah, Georgia. It doesn't matter if the person who lived there was a school teacher with a collection of ceramic owls or a textile merchant with 19th century oil paintings hanging three deep on every wall. The smell is the same: dust, stillness, the particular quiet of a space where someone used to breathe and doesn't anymore. I have walked into over 300 of these houses in 11 years. I am an estate liquidator and antique appraiser. My job is to step into the aftermath of a life, after the funeral, after the grief, after the family has taken what it wants and fought over the rest, and find the value in what remains. I open drawers. I read documents. I hold objects under light and look for the marks that tell me what something is worth and where it's been. I trace provenance, the documented history of an object from its creation to the present moment, the chain of custody that determines authenticity and value. Every object has a story. Every document has a truth. I find those truths for a living. I am very good at it. My name is Vivian Cole. I am 36 years old. I work out of an office on Bull Street in Savannah, Georgia, 2 blocks from the house where I grew up, 4 blocks from the cemetery where my father is buried. My father's name was James Arthur Cole. He was 58 years old when he died of a sudden cardiac event on a Tuesday morning in November 3 years ago. He was a quiet man, a historian by training, a collector by passion, a father by vocation. He collected things that most people overlooked: pocket watches, military ephemera, handwritten letters from the Civil War era, daguerreotypes of faces nobody remembered. He said the job of a collector was to make sure the forgotten things weren't forgotten. He taught me everything I know about looking. 2 days after his funeral, my Aunt Cecelia, his older sister, the matriarch of what remained of our family, sat across from me at the kitchen table of my father's house and laid out a stack of papers. "Your father died in debt," she said. "Significant debt. He kept it from you because he was ashamed. I want to tell you what happened next. I want to tell you about the auction catalog, and the pocket watch on page 34, and the 11 days it took me to trace a provenance chain that led directly back to a shell company in Chatham County. I want to tell you about the Autumn Estate Auction Gala at the Savannah Historic Foundation, the champagne, the chandelier light, the sound of a gavel that never came down. But first I need to tell you about my father. Because without James Arthur Cole, his hands, his patience, his specific way of holding an object to the light and saying, 'Look closer, Vivian, the truth is always in the detail,' you cannot understand what the pocket watch on page 34 of that catalog actually meant. And you cannot understand what I was willing to do about it. My name is Vivian Cole. I find the value in forgotten things. I should have looked closer, sooner. Subscribe if you haven't. Drop a comment. Your city, your name. Tell me if you've ever trusted someone with a grief so raw you didn't think to question them. I read everyone. My father's study smelled like lemon oil and old paper. It was the one room in the house my mother had given up trying to organize. Every surface covered in objects, every drawer full of folders, every shelf double stacked with books and boxes and the specific beautiful clutter of a man who believed everything was worth keeping. My mother used to stand in the doorway and shake her head and say, "James, this room is going to outlive us both." She was right, in a way she didn't intend. I grew up in that study. I did homework on the cleared corner of his desk while he cataloged acquisitions, pocket watches lined up in their velvet boxes, daguerreotypes propped against small wooden stands, letters in acid-free sleeves that he'd handle with cotton gloves, and the specific reverence of a man who understood that paper was time made visible. He taught me the language of objects before I had words for it. "Every mark means something," he'd say, turning a pocket watch over in his hands. "The scratches tell you how it was carried. The repairs tell you who valued it enough to fix it. The inscription tells you who loved it." I was 7 years old the first time he let me hold the pocket watch. It was the one he called his crown jewel, a late 19th century Swiss movement in a 14-karat gold case, the front cover inlaid with a rose-cut diamond arrangement in the shape of a compass rose. On the inside cover, an engraving, "For James, who always finds his way home." His grandmother had given it to his father. His father had given it to him. "Someday," he told me, turning it over in my 7-year-old hands, "this goes to you. You're the one who knows how to look." I held it carefully, the way he'd taught me, and looked at the compass rose. I didn't know then that looking would become my profession. I didn't know then that it would also become my only weapon. Uh, my mother died when I was 19. Breast cancer, 18 months from diagnosis to the end. My father and I spent those 18 months in the particular closeness of two people who know they are about to be left with only each other. After she was gone, we became quieter versions of ourselves, closer, in the way grief sometimes makes people closer, but also more careful, as if we both understood that the remaining thing was precious and breakable. I went to college in Charleston, art history, then a graduate certificate in appraisal studies. Came back to Savannah at 24 and started working for a local estate liquidation firm. By 27, I had my own practice. By 30, I had a reputation that reached beyond Georgia. The appraiser who could find the story in anything, who could trace a provenance chain across generations and jurisdictions, and come back with documentation that held up in court. My father came to my office once a month for lunch. We'd eat at the desk, take out from the Vietnamese place on Broughton Street, and he'd ask about my current cases with the specific curiosity of a historian who understood that every estate was a primary source document. "What did you find this week?" he'd say. And I'd tell him about the Tiffany lamp that turned out to be a reproduction, or the Civil War letter that authenticated at $30,000, or the collection of Depression-era photographs that a family had nearly thrown away. He'd listen with complete attention. Then he'd say, "Every object is a witness. It just needs someone who knows how to ask the right questions." The last lunch we had was in October, 6 weeks before he died. He seemed tired, more tired than usual. He'd had some heart irregularities, his doctor had said. Nothing alarming, something to monitor. He ate his pho slowly and asked about my current case, a large estate in Beaufort County, an old shipping family, 3 generations of accumulated objects. At the end of lunch, he put down his chopsticks and looked at me for a moment with an expression I didn't have a name for then. "You know," he said, "the most important thing I ever collected is sitting in this room right now." I looked around my office, the reference books, the equipment cases, the framed appraisal certificates on the wall. "Dad," I said, "there's nothing collectible in here." He smiled. "I know," he said. He left at 2 o'clock. I watched him walk down Bull Street from my office window, his hands in his coat pockets, his steps slower than I remembered. 6 weeks later, he was gone. The cardiac event happened on a Tuesday morning. He was found in his study, in his chair, with a volume of Civil War correspondence open on his desk. The coroner said it was fast. I have held on to that, the specific mercy of fast. My Aunt Cecelia was at the house within 2 hours of my call. Cecelia Cole was my father's older sister by 7 years, 65 at the time of his death, a widow, a woman who had spent her adult life in the specific performance of Southern Christian virtue. She attended First Baptist Church every Sunday and taught a Wednesday evening Bible study class. She spoke about trials and tribulations and the Lord's refining fire with the practiced fluency of someone who had built a social identity around spiritual endurance. She was, in every public context, the most righteous person in any room. She arrived at my father's house with a casserole dish and a specific composure that I mistook, in my grief, for strength. She took charge. That is the precise word. She took charge in the way some people take charge in a crisis, filling the space that grief leaves open, making calls, organizing the flow of visitors, managing the details that the bereaved cannot manage for themselves. I was grateful. I want to be clear about that. In the first 72 hours after my father's death, I was grateful for every decision she made so I didn't have to. That gratitude was the most expensive thing I have ever felt. 2 days after the funeral, she sat across from me at the kitchen table. She had a stack of papers, not a folder, a stack, the kind of deliberate accumulation that communicates volume and gravity. She put her hand over mine first, looked at me with the specific expression of someone about to deliver painful news that they have rehearsed. "Vivienne," she said, "there are some things about your father's finances that you need to know. He kept them from you because he loved you and he was ashamed. But they can't stay hidden now." I looked at the papers. "Your father had significant debt," she said. "Medical bills, some loans he'd taken to keep the collection funded, a line of credit that he'd been servicing for years. The total is—" She slid the top page across to me. close to $40,000. I looked at the number. If we don't address this quickly, she continued, it could affect the estate, the house, the contents. Creditors can make claims. You could lose everything, including the collection. I looked up at her. I've spoken to the creditors already, she said. If we can make a lump sum payment within 30 days, they'll settle. No estate proceedings, no court involvement, everything handled quietly. A pause. The way your father would have wanted. The way your father would have wanted. She knew exactly which key to use. How much? I said. 45,000, she said, to cover the debts and the remaining funeral costs and the administrative fees for settling the estate cleanly. I had $47,000 in my savings account, years of careful work, no debt, no extravagance. I had built that number slowly and deliberately as a person who had grown up watching her father make choices between rent and repairs. I'll need to see all the documentation, I said. The debt instruments, the creditor names, the account numbers. Of course, she said. I'll get you everything. Right now, the priority is timing. The 30-day window is critical. She was right about timing being critical. Just not for the reasons she said. I transferred the $45,000 12 days later. Cecelia had provided documentation, letters from creditors, account statements, what appeared to be official correspondence from a collections firm. It looked legitimate. It was assembled with the specific care of someone who had thought about what legitimate looked like. I was an estate appraiser. I read documents for a living. I did not look closely at those documents. That is the thing I have had to live with. I was 33 years old, recently bereaved, and I made the one professional error that my training was specifically designed to prevent. I let emotion override examination. I trusted because I was grieving. And grief, I have learned, is the oldest tool in the con artist kit. Yuck. Let me explain my work, because the work is the story. Estate liquidation is the process of valuing and selling the assets of a deceased person's estate, typically when there are no heirs who want the physical property, or when the estate needs to be converted to cash for distribution. It is the end of a life made administrative. Antique appraisal is the process of determining the fair market value of an object based on its condition, rarity, provenance, and current market demand. Provenance is the word that matters most. Provenance is the documented history of an object, where it was made, who owned it, how it changed hands, where it has been since its creation. A complete provenance chain increases an object's value significantly. A broken provenance chain raises questions. A falsified provenance chain is a federal crime. I trace provenance chains the way a detective traces alibis. I start at the present and work backward. Auction records, dealer inventories, estate sale documentation, insurance appraisals, purchase receipts, family records, photographs. I cross-reference databases, the Art Loss Register, the Interpol Works of Art Database, the American Society of Appraisers Archives, the major auction house archives going back decades. I have found objects that were stolen in wartime. I have found objects that were sold under duress. I have found objects that were listed as lost in an estate fire that turned out to be very much not lost. I have, in 11 years, documented 17 cases of estate fraud, the deliberate concealment, misrepresentation, or theft of assets from a deceased person's estate. 17 cases for other people's families. The 18th was my own. The auction catalog arrived in my email on a Thursday morning in February, 2 years after my father's funeral. It came from a colleague, Marcus Webb, a fellow appraiser based in Charleston, who sent me catalogs from significant estate sales as a matter of professional courtesy. We exchanged them regularly. Thought you'd find this interesting was his only note. The catalog was for the spring preview auction at Harrington and Associates, Fine Art and Antiques in Atlanta, a high-end house that handled significant Southern collections. I opened it with my second cup of coffee, the way I opened all catalogs, scrolling through the lot listings with the practiced half-attention of someone reading a trade publication. I was on page 34 when I stopped. Lot 147, Swiss pocket watch, late 19th century. 14-karat gold case, rose-cut diamond compass rose inlay, original movement in excellent working order. Inside cover inscription, exceptional condition, provenance, private collection, Savannah, Georgia. Estimate, $18,000 to $24,000. The photograph was small, Catalog quality, not high resolution, but I had held that watch in my hands at age 7. I had looked at the compass rose under my father's desk lamp and felt the weight of the case in my small palm. I knew that watch the way you know a face. I set down my coffee. I scrolled to the next lot. Lot 148, collection of Civil War era military ephemera, comprising 4. Authenticated letters, 2. Daguerreotype portraits, 1. Officer's Field Journal, 1. Engraved presentation sword. Provenance, private collection, Savannah, Georgia. Estimate, $35,000 to $45,000. My father had spent 20 years assembling that collection. I had sat next to him at auction houses and estate sales while he acquired each piece. I had handled each letter in its acid-free sleeve. I had looked at those daguerreotype faces enough times to know their expressions by memory. Lot 149, collection of antique pocket watches, 19th and early 20th century, comprising 14 pieces of varying manufacture and condition. Provenance, private collection, Savannah, Georgia. Estimate, $28,000 to $36,000. 14 watches. My father had 14 watches in his collection beyond the crown jewel. I counted backward. Lot 147 through lot 161. 15 lots. Every single one listed with the same provenance notation. Private collection, Savannah, Georgia. I sat at my desk for a long time. Then I did what I do. I picked up the phone and called Marcus Webb. "The Harrington catalog you sent," I said. "Lots 147 through 161. Do you have the consignor documentation?" A pause. "I can request it," he said. "Why?" "Because I know where those objects came from," I said. What followed was 11 days of the most focused, methodical work I have ever done. I want to take you through it carefully, because the process is the story, the specific, step-by-step forensics of tracing a theft that was designed to be untraceable. Understanding how it was done is the only way to understand how it was found. Day 1, I requested the consignor documentation from Harrington and Associates through Marcus, listing myself as a potential competing appraiser with provenance questions. Standard practice in the industry. Auction houses field these inquiries regularly. The consignor was listed as Magnolia Estate Holdings, LLC, Chatham County, Georgia. I ran Magnolia Estate Holdings, LLC through the Georgia Secretary of State Business Registry. Date of registration, October 14th, 3 years ago, 14 days before my father died. Registered agent, Cecelia Ann Beaumont Cole. I read that name 3 times. Then I pulled up my father's death certificate. Date of death, October 28th. Magnolia Estate Holdings, LLC was registered 14 days before my father died. I noted this in my case file. Moved on. Day 2. I pulled my father's estate records from the Chatham County Probate Court. His will had been filed for probate by Cecelia as the named executor, something I had agreed to in the fog of early grief, signing whatever she put in front of me. The probate inventory listed my father's estate as follows: personal property, household furnishings and personal effects, estimated value $8,400. No significant collectibles or antiques, no life insurance policies, cash accounts, $2,200. I read the inventory 3 times. My father had spent 30 years collecting. His collection, conservatively valued, was worth between $400,000 and $600,000 at current market. I had appraised portions of it myself, informally, over the years. The probate inventory listed no collectibles. The collection did not appear in the estate, because the collection was no longer in the estate, because it had already been transferred. I pulled the deed and transfer records for my father's property in Chatham County. 3 weeks before his death, a power of attorney document had been filed, authorizing Cecelia Cole to act on James Arthur Cole's behalf in all financial and property matters. I contacted the notary whose stamp appeared on the power of attorney. The notary, a woman named Dolores Tanner, working out of a small office in Garden City, said she had no record of notarizing a document for James Arthur Cole. I obtained a copy of the filed POA from the county records office and brought it to a forensic document examiner I had worked with on previous fraud cases. His assessment delivered on day 5. The notary stamp was reproduced digitally. The signature, purported to be James Arthur Cole, showed significant variation from authenticated exemplars. In my professional opinion, this document was fabricated. My father had never signed that power of attorney. He had never authorized anyone to transfer his assets. He had never known it was happening. Inkle. Day 6. I traced the transfer of assets from my father's collection to Magnolia Estate Holdings, LLC, through insurance records. My father had maintained a specialized collectibles insurance policy for his collection, a policy I had helped him obtain 8 years earlier. The insurer's records showed that the policy had been canceled and a final inventory submitted 11 days before my father's death. The final inventory was submitted by Cecelia Cole, under the power of attorney. The collection had been physically removed from my father's house, according to the insurance records, over a period of 3 days in mid-October. 3 days when my father was in the hospital for what was described to me as routine cardiac monitoring. While he was in the hospital, she emptied his house. I sat with that for a long time. Not the fraud, not the money. The image of her moving through his study, opening his velvet boxes, lifting his letters from their acid-free sleeves, carrying out the objects he had spent 30 years finding and caring for, while he was in a hospital bed, not knowing. That image is the one I have the most trouble putting down. Day 8. I traced the life insurance policy. My father had a whole life policy with a death benefit of $350,000, naming me as the sole beneficiary. I had never received notification of this policy. I had never been contacted by the insurer after his death. I contacted the insurer directly. The beneficiary on the policy had been changed via written request submitted under the power of attorney 6 days before my father's death. New beneficiary, Magnolia Estate Holdings, LLC. The death benefit of $350,000 had been paid directly to the LLC 30 days after my father's death. 30 days after my father's death, I was writing a $45,000 check for his debts. The total value transferred from my father's estate to Magnolia Estate Holdings, LLC, by my conservative calculation. Collection, approximately $450,000. Life insurance death benefit, $350,000. Total, approximately $800,000. Plus the $45,000 she had extracted from me directly. $845,000. I was an estate appraiser. I had documented 17 fraud cases in my career. The largest had involved approximately $200,000. This was more than 4 times that, and it had been done to my father, by his sister, in the weeks before he died. Day 9. I found the letter. I need to explain how. When Harrington and Associates sent me the provenance documentation for the auction lots, they included, as standard practice, a photograph of each object's accompanying documentation. For lot 147, the pocket watch, the documentation included a photograph of the original case. The velvet box, dark green, worn at the corners. I recognized it. I called Harrington's and asked whether the original case was included with the lot. It was. I asked whether they could examine the interior of the case carefully, specifically the bottom panel under the velvet lining. The specialist who took my call was puzzled but compliant. She put me on hold for 4 minutes. When she came back, her voice had changed. "There's an envelope," she said. "Small, sealed, written on the front. For Vivian." My father's handwriting. I drove to Atlanta that afternoon. The Harrington specialist, a young woman named Claire, who was kind enough to give me a private room, placed the envelope on a velvet-covered examination table and left me alone with it. I sat across from my father's handwriting for a long time before I opened it. The letter was 2 pages, written on the cream-colored notepaper he kept in his desk, dated October 20th, 8 days before he died. I am not going to read you every word. Some of it belongs only to me. But I will tell you what it contained. He had known, he wrote, for several weeks that his heart was failing more seriously than the doctors were telling him. He had a second opinion, privately, without telling anyone, and the prognosis was not good. He did not expect to survive the winter. He had also known, he wrote, that Cecelia had been in his financial records. He had discovered discrepancies, account accesses he hadn't authorized, inquiries to his insurance company that he hadn't made. He didn't have the strength to confront her directly or the legal resources to stop her quickly. But he had, he wrote, taken precautions. He had hidden the letter in the watch case because he knew I would find it. "You are the only person I know," he wrote, "who looks at the object and asks where it came from. Whatever she takes, and I believe she will take a great deal, leave a trail she cannot erase. The watch will find its way to you. Objects always find the people who know how to look for them." He knew. He had known she would come for his things, and he had trusted that the work, my work, the work he had taught me, would eventually lead me back to him. He had hidden the truth in the place he knew I would look. The inside of the box, under the lining, the way you find the real value of anything. I held the letter for a long time. Then I made 3 phone calls. The first call was to my attorney, a woman named Susan Adler, who specialized in estate litigation and had worked with me on 2 previous fraud cases. I told her I needed an emergency consultation. We met the next morning. I laid out 11 days of documentation on her conference table. The fabricated power of attorney, the forensic document examiner's report, the insurance policy beneficiary change, the Magnolia Estate Holdings LLC registration, the Harrington auction lots with their provenance documentation, and my father's letter. Susan read through everything in 45 minutes without speaking. Then she said, "This is wire fraud, estate fraud, insurance fraud, and forgery. The FBI has jurisdiction on the insurance fraud and wire fraud components." "I know," I said. "You understand that the auction at Harrington's creates a timing problem," she said. "Once those lots sell, the objects transfer to new owners. Recovery becomes significantly more complicated." "When is the auction?" She checked the catalog. 11 days. I had traced the provenance chain in 11 days. I needed to stop the auction before those objects, my father's objects, the things he had spent his life finding and caring for, disappeared into private collections that might hold them for decades. "What's the fastest path?" I said. "FBI art crime team," Susan said. "They can move quickly on cultural property fraud when the documentation is solid, and yours is solid." She looked at the table. "This is one of the most complete fraud documentation packages I've seen outside of a federal case. I've been doing this for 11 years, I said. "I know," Susan said. "That's why she thought she could get away with it. She didn't count on you being this good at your job." The second call was to Special Agent Thomas Park of the FBI Atlanta Field Office, Art Crime Team. I had worked with the Art Crime Team twice before, once on a case involving stolen Civil War artifacts, once on an insurance fraud case involving a forged highwayman painting. Tom Park knew my work. He answered my call on the second ring. I gave him the summary version. He asked me to send the documentation immediately. He called me back in 6 hours. "This is solid, Vivian," he said. "The forged POA alone is federal. The insurance fraud makes it a priority." "The auction is in 11 days, I said. "I know, we're moving." "I want to be there," I said. "When it happens. I want to be in the room." A pause. "That's not standard," he said. "I know," I said, "but my father hid evidence in a watch case for me to find. He trusted me to finish this. I need to be in the room." Another pause, longer. "I'll see what I can do," Tom said. The third call was to Harrington and Associates. I identified myself as the appraiser who had raised provenance questions on lots 147 through 161 and informed them that I had documentary evidence suggesting the consignor, Magnolia Estate Holdings, LLC, did not have legal title to the consigned objects. The reaction was immediate and professional. Harrington's, like all reputable auction houses, understood that proceeding with a sale on objects under title dispute was both legally dangerous and reputationally catastrophic. They did not cancel the auction. That decision required legal process. But they flagged the lots for administrative review, which meant, in practical terms, that those 15 lots would not sell until the review was resolved. The clock was running. Let me tell you about the Autumn Estate Auction Gala. The Harrington Spring Preview had been moved, for reasons unrelated to my case, a scheduling conflict with another major auction, to October. Rebranded as the Autumn Estate Auction Gala, it was now a ticketed evening event at the Savannah Historic Foundation Ballroom on Forsyth Park. Black tie, champagne, the specific theater of the high-end auction world, chandelier light and numbered paddles, and the performance of casual wealth. Cecelia had purchased a table. I know this because Susan's office obtained the guest list as part of the legal process. Cecelia Beaumont Cole, plus 3 guests, her pastor, a friend from her Bible study group, and a woman I didn't recognize, but whose name, when I ran it, turned out to be the registered agent for two other LLCs that Cecelia had incorporated in the past 4 years. She was coming to watch her brother's belongings sell. She was coming to celebrate. I thought about my father's letter. Objects always find the people who know how to look for them. She had no idea I had been looking. The Savannah Historic Foundation ballroom smelled like hothouse flowers and old money. October in Savannah is the best month, warm enough for open doors, cool enough for the long gowns that the auction crowd favored, the Spanish moss on the park oaks lit from below. I had driven past this building 100 times. I had never attended an event here. I wore a dark green dress, not for fashion, but because my father's watch case was dark green velvet and I am sentimental in ways I usually don't admit to. Susan Adler was beside me. Tom Park and his colleague from the Atlanta field office, Agent Rivera, quiet and precise, were already inside, having arrived separately. The asset freeze order had been executed that morning. The 15 lots were legally frozen pending the fraud investigation. Harrington's had been notified. The auction could proceed with every other lot. Lots 147 through 161 would not be called. What Tom and Susan had agreed to, after significant discussion, was that I would be present when Cecelia was approached. Not as a federal agent, not as a witness, as myself, as James Arthur Cole's daughter. I walked into the ballroom at 7:45 p.m. The room was arranged in the standard auction configuration. Rows of chairs facing a raised podium, cocktail tables along the perimeter, the lots displayed on stands and in cases around the room's edges. Waitstaff moved through the crowd with champagne flutes. The auctioneer, a tall man in an impeccable tuxedo, was at the podium reviewing his notes. I found Cecilia's table in the second row. She was already seated, a woman who planned to be seen, positioned front and center. She was wearing a champagne-colored gown and the specific jewelry of someone who had recently come into money. A diamond necklace I did not recognize, earrings that caught the chandelier light with the particular brilliance of recently purchased stones. My father's life insurance had paid $350,000. She had had 2 years to spend it. She had not seen me yet. The room was full. Perhaps 200 people, a significant crowd for a regional auction house. I moved along the perimeter, stopping to examine the displayed lots. And there it was. On a velvet display stand between a case of silver flatware and a collection of 19th century maps, the pocket watch. Lot 147. Under the display glass, the compass rose caught the light, the same way it had caught the light under my father's desk lamp when I was 7 years old, and he placed it in my hands and said, "Someday, this goes to you." I stood in front of that case for a long time. A man beside me leaned in to look. "Beautiful piece," he said. "Yes," I said. "It was my father's." He looked at me. I moved on. Tom Park appeared at my elbow at 8:15. "Ready," he said quietly. "Yes," I said. "Remember, you're an observer. Rivera and I make the approach. You're there for documentation verification if she challenges the provenance claim." "I understand," I said. "Vivian." He paused. "Your father sounds like he was a good man." "He was the best person I knew," I said. We moved towards Cecilia's table. She saw me when I was 12 feet away. I watched it happen. The social smile, the prepared greeting of a woman who had spent 2 years being publicly gracious at the cost of her brother's estate, and then the specific recalibration of recognition. The smile held for 1 second after she saw my face, the way a face holds an expression while the brain is catching up. Then it dropped. "Vivian," she said. Her voice was even. She was better than I expected. "Aunt Cecelia," I said. I stepped to the side. Tom Park and Agent Rivera moved into her sight line. "Ms. Cole," Tom said. "My name is Special Agent Thomas Park, FBI Atlanta Field Office. This is Agent Rivera. We'd like a moment of your time." The table went quiet. Her pastor looked confused. Her friend with the LLC registered name had gone very still. "I don't understand," Cecelia said. Her voice had lost some of its evenness. Tom placed a document on the table. "This is an asset freeze order issued by the Northern District of Georgia Federal Court, covering all assets held by Magnolia Estate Holdings, LLC, including the lots consigned to this auction under that entity's name. Cecilia looked at the document, then at me, then back at Tom. "There must be some mistake," she said. "Those are my brother's items. He asked me to manage his estate." "Under a power of attorney," I said. She looked at me. "A power of attorney that a forensic document examiner has assessed as fabricated," I said. The notary stamp was digitally reproduced. The signature does not match authenticated exemplars of my father's signature. "That's absurd," she said. But her voice had changed. The performance was still running, but the engine behind it was stuttering. "The insurance policy beneficiary change was submitted under the same POA," I said, 6 days before my father died. The $350,000 death benefit was paid to Magnolia Estate Holdings, LLC. I was the named beneficiary on the original policy. The auctioneer at the podium was calling the room to order. Around us, the crowd was beginning to settle into their seats. Several people at nearby tables had turned to look at our tableau. A woman in a champagne gown, 2 men in dark suits, another woman in dark green standing very still. "I don't know what she's told you," Cecilia said to Tom. Her voice had found a new register. Wronged woman, misunderstood matriarch. "She and her father were estranged. She has no idea what his financial situation—" "We were not estranged," I said. "She was never close to—" "He left me a letter," I said. The performance stopped. The specific quality of the silence that followed was different from any other silence I have described. This was the silence of a person who thought they had accounted for everything and just discovered they hadn't. "In the watch case," I said, "under the velvet lining. He dated it October 20th, 8 days before he died." Cecilia looked at the display stand across the room, the watch case, the dark green velvet box that her people had shipped to Atlanta with the rest of the collection, not thinking to look inside the lining. She had taken everything. She had just missed the most important thing. "He knew," I said. "He knew you were in his accounts. He knew what you were planning. He didn't have the strength to stop you, so he left evidence in the one place he knew I would find it." Her eyes, which had been fixed on the watch case, moved back to me. For a moment, underneath the performance and the recalibration and the specific armor of a woman who had spent her whole life being right, I saw something that looked almost like fear. Not of the FBI, not of the asset freeze, of me. Of the fact that she had underestimated what he had taught me. "Miss Cole," Tom said, "we'd like you to come with us." The auctioneer's voice carried across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin with lot 101. Cecilia stood. She straightened the skirt of her champagne gown with the automatic dignity of a woman who had spent 65 years maintaining appearances. Then she looked at me one last time. I looked back. I did not say anything. I didn't need to. My father's words had already said everything. Objects always find the people who know how to look for them. She had taken his objects. I had found them. She walked out between Tom Park and Agent Rivera, and the room parted around them, and the auctioneer continued calling lots, and the chandelier light moved across the champagne flutes and the numbered paddles, and I stood in the center of the ballroom and breathed. What? The federal case took 14 months. Cecilia pleaded guilty to wire fraud, insurance fraud, and forgery. 3 counts, reduced from 5 in exchange for full cooperation and asset restitution. Her attorney negotiated effectively. She served 8 months in a federal minimum security facility and was released to 3 years of supervised probation. I want to be honest, I had wanted more. 14 months of proceedings and 8 months served felt, in some recesses of my heart, insufficient for what she had done. For the objects she had moved through my father's house while he was in the hospital. For the fake debts she had handed me 2 days after his funeral and watched me write a check for. For 2 years of him being described to me, and by extension to anyone who asked, as a man who had died in debt and failure, when the truth was that he had spent his life building something of value, and she had taken it. 8 months! I have not fully made peace with that. What I have made peace with is the restitution. The 15 Harrington lots, frozen before the auction, were returned to the estate and subsequently to me as the sole legitimate heir. The pocket watch is currently in my office on Bull Street in its dark green velvet case in the spot on my desk where it catches the morning light. The life insurance death benefit of $350,000, plus interest and penalties, was recovered through the civil proceedings that ran parallel to the federal case. The $45,000 I had paid for my father's fabricated debts was included in the restitution order. The collection, my father's 30 years of finding and caring for forgotten things, is intact. I have rehung it, recatalogued it, re-sleeved the letters, reboxed the watches. It is the most thoroughly documented collection in my professional portfolio. I have not sold a single piece. Cecelia and I have not spoken since the ballroom. I do not expect to. There is a question I have been asked several times since this story became known in the estate and appraisal community. A professional network is a small world, and these things travel. Did you know, somewhere, that something was wrong? Before the catalog? Before Atlanta? The honest answer is, I think I knew something. Not the specific shape of it. Not the fraud, the LLC, the forged POA, but some weight, some wrongness that I had filed under grief and chosen not to examine. The first year after my father's death, I had dreams about his study. Not bad dreams, just the study, exactly as it was, exactly as I had known it for 30 years. Objects in their places, velvet boxes open on the desk, the smell of lemon oil and old paper. In the dreams, I would always be standing in the doorway, never going in. After the case was resolved, the dreams changed. In the new version, I go in. I sit at the desk. I pick up the watch. I look at the compass rose. I think that's the best I can explain it. My father's letter, the full letter, both pages, in his handwriting on cream notepaper, is framed above my desk. Not the parts about the fraud, the other part, the last paragraph. I won't read all of it, but I'll tell you what it ends with. The most important thing I ever collected, he wrote, is not in any box or case or sleeve. It is the way you learn to look, the patience, the attention, the refusal to accept that something is without value just because no one else can see it yet. I collected that in you for 36 years, and I am prouder of it than anything else I ever found. Whatever she takes, look for the truth in the detail. You always find it there. I love you, Vivienne. Go home. I am 36 years old. I have walked into over 300 houses that smell like dust and stillness and the particular quiet of a space where someone used to breathe and doesn't anymore. I walk in and I open the drawers and I read the documents and I hold the objects under the light and I ask the question my father taught me to ask. Where did this come from? What does it cost? And who does it belong to? Every object is a witness. It just needs someone who knows how to ask the right questions. I am still asking. My father taught me how. If you've ever lost someone and trusted the wrong person with your grief, this story is for you. If you've ever been told that someone you love failed, when the truth was that they were taken from, this story is for you. If you've ever found the truth in a detail that everyone else walked past, this story is for you. Subscribe. Drop a comment. Your city, your name, anything. Tell me if you've ever found something that was supposed to be lost. The watch is on my desk. The compass rose is pointing home. Objects always find the people who know how to look for them.